Picking up where we left off, we're going to go ahead and look at our next brush, but before I do that, I want to do a little bit of house cleaning. The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I come back over here to my Flow Sparkler Glow. I'm going to reset that brush back to its default settings so that we always start with the default settings and then you can modify them as you need. The other thing I want to do is I want to come over here to brushes. I want to make sure that I have playback stroke turned off so that we can begin to paint with our next brush and have it be the actual effect of painting with the brush. So what I want to do now is I want to come over here from my brush selector and I want to come down below to the Spring Cobweb brush. Now you can see this doesn't have glow after it, and this brush is not meant to be a glow brush. So because it's not meant to be a glow brush and because we're working on a dark background, we're going to want to use a light color. In this case, I'll just use pure white so that we can really see what's going on. Now I'm just going to go ahead and press really hard and then press soft, like so. And you can see what this brush does. It basically gives us this kind of weird, stringy, cobwebby type of thing. So this can be useful in and of itself, but we can modify this to make this way, way more useful. So I'm going to do a Control-A and backspace to clear the canvas. The first thing I want to point out to you is that, again, the brush calibration is going to be very, very important to this. Now, right now, I'm using the default brush calibration of Painter, and it's given me a result that looks something like this. Now, if I press lightly and I move slowly, you can see that we're basically getting this kind of thin, linear, stringy effect. And if I press hard, it's going to give us more of kind of like the scribbly effect. So pressure is very, very important to the way that this works, but also velocity is important to the way that this works. So we're going to go ahead and turn on the brush calibration now to see how the velocity and pressure are going to change. So again, I'm going to go ahead and press lightly. You can see that now I'm really able to take advantage of that stringy quality. And if I press hard, you can see that those strings go out much, much further now than they did before. So the pressure and the velocity are now modified thanks to our brush calibration, and that's an important thing to know. So now I do prefer this particular brush calibration. You're going to want to play with the brush calibration sliders and get exactly the quality that you want for the effects that you want, because it's going to be different on different tablets, on different systems, and you're just going to have to play with it until you get the effects that you're looking for if you're not getting the same effects as I am. But I'm going to leave that set where it is for right now. Control-A and backspace again to clear the canvas. Now, what I want to point out to you is that this is, in fact, based on spring particles. And you can come over here to the spring particles palette, and you can see that this is, in fact, what we're using right here. We're using the nucleus type, and that's what we're seeing when I begin to press and drag. You see this thing that looks kind of like a squid as I'm pulling softly and slowly? You can see that that center particle that I'm pulling, that's my main point. And then all these particles are kind of coming off that like that's a nucleus. And as I press harder, you can see that the strings basically around that nucleus are spinning faster and faster, and the harder I press, the more that they're spinning, the more chaotic that becomes. So that's more or less the key to understanding how this brush is doing what it's doing. Is it's reacting to our pressures, reacting to our velocity, but it's doing it based around this type of setup here where we have our center point and then we have these guys either moving around or not, but they're sort of trailing it like squid arms on a squid. You know, the head of the squid goes in one direction and the arms just sort of trail after it. So let me come over here to the particles general, and you can see what we have here as far as our basic settings. You can see that we have global chaos and we have local chaos, and right now they're both tied to pressure. And that's going to be something that's very important to understand. I'm just going to go ahead and double click opacity for a second so that we can see these guys down here. These guys are tied to expressions of pressure. And this is the reason why things become so chaotic when I'm pressing harder, is because these guys kick in as I'm pressing harder. And that's where that whole chaotic thing comes from. Okay, so how is this brush meant to be used? What are we supposed to do with this brush? Well, Control-A and backspace. The first thing I'll tell you about this is that this brush doesn't work so good at the size that it's at right now. At a size of 250, it really doesn't kick into its full power. And so my feeling is that it's much better if you max this guy out at 749.9, which is basically 750. Now this is a big, big brush, and it may really kind of kick your system back for a second in order for it to calculate how that brush is going to work. Once it's done its thing, then we can go ahead and begin to paint with it. So you can see here, it's done its thing. I'm going to go ahead and you can see now that we're getting a very different effect because it's so much bigger. We can really see those strings, and it's a lot more sort of in your face, and that's kind of cool, right? I mean, there's some interesting things that you could do with that, but this is a stringy cobweb effect. So the idea being is that if we press hard to sort of identify where we're wanting to, sort of the origin of all of it, and then pull down, you can see all these guys are sort of being pulled like so. And you can see that we can actually create sort of strings that are going back like so. And so you can see that this can actually be really useful for creating cobwebby types of effects. But we can do even more with this. Now, right now, one of the things that you're not really aware of is that this guy is using the Flowmap to sort of control some of that chaos. And this marbled Flowmap is really not the ideal one for what we're looking to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of the Flowmap, and we're also going to take advantage of a different Flowmap. So we're going to come over here, and I'm going to choose one that I think is really well suited to this, which is hot lava. Now, right now, you can see that this has some kind of funky settings to it. These are the settings that are in by default, and these are the settings that you do want to use. You don't want to set these back to like 100, 150 or something like that. You want to leave these where they are because these actually work out really nicely. The other thing we want to do is we want to really kick in that Flowmap. So I'm going to come over here to say somewhere, well, let's just go ahead. Actually, at 100%, it's going to move really slow. So let's go ahead and start somewhere around, say, 50%. So basically what's going to happen now is that Flowmap is going to kick in, and it's going to control where the density of these guys actually happens. So Control A and backspace. The other thing that we want to do here is we can change the scale. So right now it's 372. I'm going to reduce that scale down so that these guys are denser. And I'm just going to go ahead and start scribbling like so. And what's going to happen is we're going to start building up sort of this cobwebby type of effect, but it's going to have some control due to the Flowmap. The higher the Flowmap slider is set, the more control we're going to have. So again, I'll come over here and I'll set this up to 100. Now, like I said, it's going to be kind of slow, so it's not going to be so awesome for a demo, but it's going to be something that you can do on your computer, most likely because your computer is probably going to be a little bit more powerful than mine. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and pull this, and you can see now that Flowmap is really kicking in, and it's really helping us to sort of control where the density of these guys is happening. And we're getting sort of these round shapes here. You can see them particularly down in this neck of the woods, these sort of rounder shapes here that look very kind of cobwebby. Well, that's due to this hot lava. And again, the scale is going to be the thing that determines this. So if I go ahead and I make the scale smaller yet, and I kind of scribble, you can see we're getting smaller, denser types of things. This is where it kind of slows down a bit. If I go ahead and I increase that scale back up, and I go ahead and do the same thing, you're going to see that now we're going to get much bigger, sort of more gappy qualities to this. So you can see here by controlling our Flowmap and utilizing our Flowmap slider and getting exactly what we want, we can actually start to build some fairly complex cobwebby types of effects with this brush. And that's really the point of it. I mean, it was meant to be used by people who are doing things like Lord of the Rings paintings where, they're fighting Shelob the spider or something like that, or Indiana Jones where he's walking into a temple and there's cobwebs everywhere. Or even like a Spider-Man illustration where, you need some cobwebs in the background or something like that. I mean, there's lots of cool applications for a brush like this. And like I said, by using the hot lava Flowmap and using the Flowmap slider and changing things like our brush calibration, you can really control how this brush is going to do its thing and get precisely the effect that you're looking to achieve.